Hello, everybody, and welcome to Adventures in History. And it's a viewer request night where we talk about whatever you all want to talk about instead of what I want to talk about. But in many occasions, like tonight, it lines up and we get cool things that I get very excited to talk about. But let me say hello to everybody. Matt, hello. Cave Geek, welcome in. Zanta, welcome in. Diviner, welcome in. I have played Total War games in the past. I tend to sink way too much time into Total War games. Because you can sort of just play them infinitely. And you have like win conditions, sure. But then you're like, I wonder if I could win doing this. Or I wonder if I could win doing that. And you just end up with like endless numbers of games. We're being visited by the puppy. You want to get on camera? Are you going to switch over? Oh, come on, stupid mouse. Well, there's a puppy butt. There's an itchy puppy. And obviously, none of my alerts are going off. Hey, Kaylee Poo. What's he doing? Some sugars? No. It's raining outside, so she's not having the world's best time right now. She's not a very big fan of rain and thunder. But we just got 2 subscriptions and my alerts didn't go off at all. And I'm really sorry about that. I'm becoming very frustrated with Streamlabs. I have spent now a cumulative of about 2 hours with Streamlabs trying to figure out what is actually happening and what's going on. And the issue that we keep running into here is that there are lack of triggers, so it won't actually go off when it's supposed to, or if it does go off, we'll end up with doubled audio. But I can make it trigger manually and it'll work. And that just bothers me. So I'm wondering now, I'll even show you what I'm looking at here. So this is sort of the new setup for Streamlabs, and they have a thing for subscriptions, but then they also have this other thing for resub, which is not something that I've enabled, and I don't know if I have to go in and make a variation for a resub or a gift sub, or if this master subscription thing here will work. And I don't know if you all can tell or not, but my power is flickering. You can't tell because I was on the Streamlabs site. So Matt and Caldillo, thank you so much for the subscriptions. I really do appreciate those. But it's getting messy to try to figure out what's going on. And yeah, Caldillo, they have a desktop application, but they really want you to use their platform to stream out of as well. And I would rather not use the Streamlabs program. I'd rather use just OBS itself. So they're having trouble meshing right now, and it's really frustrating because it would be very beneficial to me to have my alerts work the way that they're supposed to. But thank you all very much for the subscriptions and the support, and thank you, as always, for being Spartacus. So, 60 Turns of Peace by giving away land, the greatest peace period I achieved in Medieval Total War 2. Yeah, see, I never played any of the medieval stuff. The last one that I played was Shogun Total War. That's the one that's set in Japan. And it was quite good, but I found myself spending just way too much time. Way too much time, right? And I feel like I'm either lagging or dropping frames or something because I have a feeling that the computer and internet situation here is getting bad. And I'm really tired of my mouse. I don't know if my batteries are dying or not, but it's being a butt as well. It's just not a good tech day for the Shaner. Maybe I should put it on something else. Let me get this. Will it work on there? Hey, look. Maybe it just needed a different surface to work on. Okay, well, anyway, blah, blah, blah. So yeah, we're going to talk about the Scythians tonight, and that's the topic of the viewer request. I guess prior to kind of launching into this, I did want to spend just a little bit of time letting everybody know about some changes that are about to happen on Twitch side. This isn't something that I've done. This is something that Twitch is about to do. Twitch has decided, in light of greed and inflation, that they are about to raise the price of a tier 1 sub, and it's going to go up from $4.99 to $5.99 US dollars. Now, I never expect anybody to subscribe on this channel at all, period, because I would do this even if nobody subscribed, and I would have just as much fun doing it if nobody subscribed. The subscription stuff is not why I'm here, and nobody should feel any sort of compulsion or need in order to or towards subscribing or not subscribing. I have a good time just hanging out and talking, right? This is what I do. It's my calling. It's a thing, right? If the move upwards in dollar amount is something that is going to bother you, it bothers me too. This is not something that is designed at making streamers more money, though that is the way that Twitch is pitching it. They're saying, "Oh, look, we're going to make you more money," and it's possible, but it's not for us. Again, Twitch takes half of all monies that you spend on subscriptions, and it's not something that I can do. It's not something that I can change. So if that going up bothers you, it bothers me too. Now, I'm going to say something here which is not a suggestion, or it's not a pitch, and this isn't a request. This is purely for informational purposes that might allow you to make different decisions if you so desire. Please don't feel pressured. Please don't feel like this is a thing. However, I have for about a year now run a Patreon page for people that specifically want to support the stream, but people that don't want to give money to Jeff Bezos. And I'm way down with that. So if you feel like paying $6 a month instead of $5 a month is a pain in the butt and you don't want to do it, that's cool. You don't have to do any of these options at all, period. But if you did want to continue to financially support the stream, the Patreon prices that I have are, it's all one tier, it's all $5 US. I'm not changing my prices. And for full disclosure efforts, again, this is not, I'm not doing this for money or effort or anything like that, or try hard or whatever. Patreon takes a smaller cut out of the overall cost than Twitch does. So Twitch takes half of the $5 or however much you spend. Patreon only takes about 30%. So I actually make more money off of Patreon supporters than I do Twitch supporters. So that's, again, just for information. If you don't want to do anything, don't do anything. I'm not asking you to. I'm not telling you to. I'm not pressuring you to. Just out there to help you try to make decisions. So, all of that being said, felt kind of dirty. So let's talk some history, and maybe I'll earn my living tonight, I guess, or something like that. I don't know. I'm on summer break, right? Okay, so Scythians, this is a viewer request. This is something that viewers voted on last week when we were doing streams. This is a topic that I really, really like. I normally spend between 35 and 45 minutes or so putting together stream notes. I think I typed out this outline in maybe 10, 15 minutes because I know a lot about the Scythians. I really like the Scythians, and they are just generally cool people. So it's something to think about and to look at. So first off, who were these people? Well, they came from Central Asia, most notably. And if we go back in time and we're trying to figure out where the first Scythians came from, they're going to come from what we would call the Northern Central Asian steppe. And that's a kind of a weird word. But what we're looking at is this region right here, right? It's kind of big and open, and it's very flat. And this is the origin zone of the people that will go on to be later called the Scythians. And they were, during this period of time, fully nomadic, and they likely originated from a big migration that came out of Iran back around the 2000s or so BC era that sort of moved up into this Central Asian area. And culturally speaking, they're going to have some ties to Iranian people. Now, not modern Iranian people. We're talking about Iran from 2,000 years ago, before Iran was even a country. So we're talking about people that would be Gita or Median or classical Persian. These are very different people groups, politically speaking, than the modern state of Iran. But this is geographically referred to as the Iranian Plateau. Yes, they are horseback archers, absolutely, and we'll talk about that extensively tonight. They were pastoral nomads, so they raised herds of livestock, and horses were one of the biggest ones that was sort of central to part of their identity and central to their warfare efforts. And that is going to be a common theme tonight. But anyway, we're talking about this region right around here. They're not cowboys. Not cowboys. But cool, just not cowboys. Now, there's going to be some interesting stuff that comes out of this. Most notably, there's an interesting situation here where a lot of this area today is very, very cold. And that is going to be beneficial for preserving a lot of stuff. Frank, aloha. Yes, way earlier than Mongols. Way earlier than Mongols. Several thousand years before Mongols. At this point, we don't even have Turkic peoples, period. We are before, at this point, even the Yuezhi, who were sort of the proto-Mongols. What year is it? We're around... when the migration is leaving Iran and moving up into Central Asia, we're talking about around 2000-ish BC. By the time we get to the first culture that is probably... I'm not typing in the right window here. The first culture that we identify with the Scythians is a group called the Shrubnaya culture. And these people are identifiable as far back around 1000 BC, and are going to have genetic markers that identify them going back a few hundred years prior to that. Did they have chonky horses? No, they did not depict their horses as chonky. In fact, their horses are actually rather slim, and I'll show you some work later on where they have depicted their own horses and stuff like that. Now, I know that this is a letdown because we do absolutely love our chonky horses. We, even have an emote that celebrates the chonk, right? But alas, no chonky horses. Even earlier than the Sarmatians. The Sarmatians are going to show up at the very end of the discussion tonight and be partially responsible for the end of the Scythians, and they're in the 200s BC. What does this make Scythians related to other Persians? Tangentially, we're talking about a gap of several hundred years in culture. So again, we're leaving here in the 2000-ish range, and we're going to come up here and hang out in Central Asia for about 800 or so years before we start seeing Srebnaya culture being identifiable with genetics. And by the time the Scythians are moving, we're actually looking at the 800s BC, so that would be about 1200 years after we're leaving. So there are a lot of generations between Iranian people of the time, or Persian people of the time, and the Scythians. They're going to be interesting cousins, though, and there are going to be some elements of their culture that are similar enough that they actually ally with the Medes a few times and cause trouble with Persia. But we'll talk about all that stuff again later on. Great questions, though, tonight. Excellent questions. So the Srebnaya culture is going to be here in the southern part of the Siberian flat. Well, I mean, today this is like Kazakhstan, but they range as far up here into Siberia and over here in this region. By the time we get to about 1000 or 900, they're going to start moving in this direction. And that's going to be partially because of other groups that are expanding. And if we look here, we can see our migration patterns. So wrong button. Up here we can see the Massagetes, and we can see that by the 8th century they are going to push the Scythians down into this region. This region right here is where we would today call the Caucasus, and these are mountains are the Caucasus right here. So this is modern day southern part of Russia, Georgia, Armenia, Azerbaijan, Turkey, northern part of Iran, Iraq, that kind of stuff. But you can see that they moved here around 800s, and then they moved down here, 8th century, about 700s, and then down here by the 600s, and over here by the 600s. So they're going to camp out right here for a while, and this is going to be a pretty important zone for them. And that's going to be where they make their capital eventually. But when we look at this particular culture, what are we looking at and what are we talking about? A few things. Well, we have wonderfully preserved things because of this really kind of good luck of them getting up into Siberia, because Siberia permafrost preserves cool stuff like this. And you're like, well, that looks stupid, and what the devil is that? It's like a whole bunch of lungs or something, right? This is actually the remains of a Scythian saddle that was found in a tomb. And so they're moving at the very end of the Bronze Age and at the beginning of the Iron Age. Bronze Age is typically going to be considered done by about 1100, and the Iron Age is going to typically be considered starting around 1000 to the 900s. And it depends on what point you want to mark out at the beginning of the Iron Age if you're talking about the Neo-Assyrian expansion that's going to be in the 900s. But again, the concept Bronze Age and Iron Age has a different timeline for different regions of the world, right? So if you look at like Chinese Bronze Age, those dates don't line up with the Mesopotamian Mediterranean Bronze Age. The terms Bronze Age and Iron Age very frequently get used to mean the Mediterranean Bronze Age, but that has a lot of like Western-centric, Eurocentric ideology behind it. It denies the fact that other people had Bronze Ages and Iron Ages. And for example, if you go to like Sub-Saharan Africa, their Bronze Age isn't until the early part of the AD period, which is like almost 2,500 years after the Bronze Age started in the medieval period. But populations are different, population densities are different, levels of technology are different, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But a fair question, right? And don't ever feel bad about asking questions. Allie, what's up? Good to see you. So this is a Scythian saddle, and we've got a few different parts here. First off, we have the actual saddle itself, which is made out of leather, and we can see here that's even been mended a few times, and it's got leather bands or thongs that are holding it together. We have a big wool pad that would have been under this guy that would have sort of padded the butt, right? And then we have this particular pad that's got all these straps on it. That is the actual part of the saddle that goes around the horse. And you can see part of the girth strap here that would have gone around the stomach of the horse. So this again was in a tomb in Siberia, which is one of the reasons why it's so well preserved. And that's actually what Brittany's asking here. So again, when you get up to Siberia, the permafrost and the temperature and the oxygen content of the soil is really ideal for preserving non-metallic remains. And I can even show you this right here. This is a burial mound, again in Siberia. And mounds are quite common for Scythian nobility, even as far back as the Srubnaya culture. This particular mound here is rather large and contained actually contained 5 different burial sites, but this burial had 2 different people in it. It had a mother and a child. And you can see here that the tomb itself is a rather large tumulus, and you can see another one here in the background, and then several smaller ones here. This particular region is referred to as Russia's Valley of the Kings, and it's very common for archaeological sites here to uncover Scythian nobility. But inside the burial chamber itself, you have these big timbers that are going to support the body, and the bodies have been placed inside of this. If you see the finger quote floor of the tomb here, these are wooden planks that have been placed under the body, and the bodies have been placed inside of this chamber. And then, of course, there would have been a lid that would have gone on top of that, and then would have been covered with dirt. But the cold and the relative dryness of this area is really, really cool for preserving stuff. So we have a fair amount of really interesting stuff when it comes to the Scythians. And one of the cooler things that actually got my wife interested in suggesting the Scythians is this particular find. This is a boot that came out of the permafrost that is remarkably well preserved for something that is 2,600 years old. And this would have been a Scythian boot, likely of someone of a fairly high level of social rank. Welcome back, Cave. Dr. Evo, how's it going, man? Good to see you. Yeah, your boots look older than this, right? So this was discovered a couple years ago, and made a lot of a lot of news sites, and I think I shared a link to this on the Discord back when it happened. But this is really fascinating, and again, this is the sort of stuff that we can find. And I don't know if you all can tell, but on the sort of the lace work or the seam work that sews these designs, they have these tiny little beads. Just absolute high, crazy levels of craftsmanship that are involved in making something that's like this. Just absolutely crazy. How many years old, Claudia? Probably 2,500, 2,600 years old, at a fair guess. Feet pics. What up, Tuna? My first reaction was, whoa. My second reaction was, I guess if you live in permafrost, you have a lot of downtime to decorate your clothes. Well, even so, Frank, this would have been an item of a very high-level noble person. This would have been a pair of shoes that would have unmistakably displayed massive amounts of wealth, right? This is the rich people stuff. You don't see this on the common person, or even on the Scythian like middle class, but we'll explain what the middle class is later on. Anyway, so Shrubnaya culture turns into the Scythians, or that's the origin group that we go on to end up calling the Scythians once they move over. If we're talking about their social organization, they were tribal, and their tribes were led by Kurgans, which is where we get the title for tonight. I'm only Kurgan after all. You know, I don't know if anybody's... there are plenty of people that have heard that song. That's why I picked the lyric. But anyway, Kurgans were basically warlords, and they gained their position by being the biggest and the best. But by the time we move into the Caucasian region, and we're here between the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea, you start seeing more Scythians that are going to start settling down. And when you become sedentary, what ends up happening is the classes start to separate. And by the time we get to the later Scythians, after they formed a kingdom, you're going to end up with a royal tribe. And to be Kurgan, you're going to end up having to come from that particular tribe. In the end, there can be only one. What's up, Unreal Brian? How's it going? Just dropped by. Recently bought Beckwith's The Scythian Empire. Yeah, that's a big one. So they kind of had slaves. There were people that were forced to work. This is, of course, after they've moved into our region here on the map and settled down some. There were much fewer social classes distinctions when we're fully nomadic, right? But when you start settling down and living in cities, you're going to further develop social classes. So they had slaves, and they kept war prisoners, but there was a fairly common gateway for those people to end up transitioning into citizens, or I guess kind of climatizing themselves to the Scythian culture and kind of converting to Scythian culture. It's not really like a religious thing. It's more like after a while, if you were in a certain position, you could maybe convince them to let you join the army instead of being a field slave or something like that, and you could kind of work your way out. But it's not a fully like, I own you, you must work for me for the rest of your life kind of slavery, right? It's more like, I've beaten the crap out of you, and then if I'm going to make you work for a while, but if you end up being kind of amenable to our way, we can maybe make some deals. They're never going to be high class, right? You're never going to end up being like Scythian nobility or something like that, but you could maybe get a little bit more freedom than just being finger-quoted a slave. Bats or birds? What up, DCI Banks? Highlander is the early reference to the Kurgan, and that's fair. That's fair, 100%. I wish they would have done that differently. There's a lot of like really interesting stuff they could have done with that character in Highlander, but I think they were just trying to come up with something that was like, oh, this guy's big and scary. And what's really interesting here is that the character Kurgan from the Highlander movie doesn't necessarily match with the description of the average Scythian, who was maybe the only thing that would have been similar is that they tended to be fairly tall. But they tended to have light-colored eyes and red hair. A lot of the people are described as having red hair, and you're like, wait, I thought gingers were only Celtic. Well, it's interesting that a lot of the Scythian people end up kind of running into Celtic people over the course of their history. Well, he wasn't average, was he? No, I mean, that's what I said. Like, the only thing that might be similar was that he was tall. But Scythians are interesting folk. I don't think that the Kurgan in Highlander is a good example of a Kurgan in history, though. What about linguistically? Well, this is where we run into a really unfortunate truth, and that is that the Scythians didn't have a written language. And that's problematic, because when you don't have a language and you're not writing your own history, you're leaving behind relics and artifacts, sure, and you're leaving behind burials and stuff like that, but you're not telling your side of the story. So a lot of the stuff that we know about the Scythians, we really only sort of know because we hear about them from Chinese sources or from Assyrian sources or from Greek sources or from Etruscan sources. And everybody knows that when one culture describes another culture, especially from afar, you're likely to run into quite a bit of bias. And this is especially true with Herodotus. Of course, Herodotus, a very famous Greek writer who wrote one of the first histories that we ever have in history. He writes a lot about the Scythians. But in his writing, especially when he's writing about their religion, everything that he does is trying to equate what they do with what the Greeks do. And so he says a whole bunch of stuff like, oh, their god is this, and it's obviously because he's a Greek god. This is not true. The Scythians end up coming into contact with the Greeks, but they had a religious pantheon well before they ever knew that the Greeks existed. This is a Hellenocentric viewpoint from Herodotus. And you get a lot of that stuff when people are describing the Scythians. And it's also fair to point out that the Scythians end up running into a whole bunch of other people and kicking their butts and burning down their cities and causing a lot of trouble. So when you get descriptions of the Scythians, you very frequently hear people in the ancient world refer to them as stuff like barbarians, right? So sometimes you get these stories about how the Scythians are cool and they're great, and other times you get these stories about how they're horrible and bloodthirsty and they eat each other and they sacrifice humans and all this stuff. And, I mean, they did sacrifice humans, but we're getting ahead of ourselves. The point is, they didn't write their own histories, and that gives us very biased sources about them that we have to work very, very diligently to match to archaeological evidence. And that leaves a lot of blanks, and it leaves a lot of hypotheticals. And this is something that, as a historian, you run into a lot, and I'm not, like, worried about this. I'm not staying up late at night wondering if we've got the exact lineage and relationships of the Scythian pantheon gods with each other. Like, what if that guy was actually the son and not the father? Not what I'm worried about. But, you know, there are questions that can still be answered, and I don't know if we ever will get them answered because we don't have sources of Scythian heritage, right? How can I add looking for Scythian ancestry to my dating profile? I'd like you tall, fair-eyed, and redheaded. Interestingly enough, the only... we have archaeological evidence and we have genetic evidence of a lot of this stuff, but one of the things that we look at a lot if we're trying to figure out who might be related to whom is language. And we know that the Scythians spoke a language, but the problem is that we don't have a lot of their words because we don't have them written down, right? So what we have are place names and proper names and a couple of terms here or there that are recorded in other people's languages, but those other people might be spelling it wrong or they might be transliterating it wrong. They were Caucasian with... well, yeah, I mean, they were literally Caucasian because they were living in the Caucasus Mountains and, like, right around here. They weren't from Russia because Russia didn't exist. They were from this region over here, which is, like, today, all those areas with the word Stan. But, like, they ranged up here into the Siberian tundra, which is in modern-day Russia. But modern-day Russians aren't related to these people. Modern Russians are from a whole different group of people that showed up 1,000 to 2,000 years later. What if they didn't speak any language? What if it was like a silent movie? Well, that doesn't work because we have evidence of them talking with people. But one of the things that we can do is look at language groups and see if there are any modern languages that have any of the ancient languages around. And the only thing that we can really point at that preserves potentially any of the original Scythian language is this little group right here, which is a language group called Ossetian. And there's a North and a Southern Ossetian dialect. And this little region right here, which is in southern Russia and northern Georgia, is about the only thing that we can directly point at as maybe being a descendant of the Scythian language. And that actually has to go through a couple of different people groups before it ends up being Ossetian. It has to go through Sarmatians and the Alans, and then the Ossetians, which is a very small group and a very... I think I'm back. Yeah, I'm back. I know that my resolution is probably really horrible right now. I don't know what's going on. Well, it's raining really bad right now. There's a storm. So it's quite possible that somebody hit a tree or some junk like that, or somebody was just being an idiot. Anyway. Cool. So hopefully that didn't end up making two whole streams that I'll have to stitch together, but we don't know. Like, on my end, OBS doesn't think that I ever dropped, so it was a Twitch issue. I am neck to work. I have no idea what that means. Back. Okay, gotcha. I'm neck to work. Interesting. Okay, so not very many modern potential linguistic descendants. So where do we even get the word Scythian from? A fair question. They didn't call themselves Scythians. They had a couple of different names for themselves. We call them Scythians today, mostly because that's what the Greeks called them, and we're being, again, Eurocentric. The Greeks, most notably people like Herodotus, referred to these people as Scythians probably because they heard the Scythians speaking and took one of the words to mean something that was similar to a Greek word. So if you have, and I think somebody even maybe brought this up last week when we were voting on this, if you've ever heard that the word Scythian just means archer in Greek, you are correct, but that's not necessarily what the Scythians called themselves. The Scythians called themselves something that probably sounded like the Greek word for archer, and then the Greeks were like, oh, look, that word sounds like our word for bow. and they shoot bows. So they must be the bow people. They're the archers. But again, this is a Greek bias going, their words must be our words, right? They're just speaking a horrible dialect of our language because Greek language is best language, right? So, there we go. Not to be confused with the Scythians, a subculture from the 80s. Oh, wow. Yeah, not the same. Did the Scythians push a migration wave into Europe, or did they occupy abandoned land? No, they moved into territory that had other people living there. And that's actually the sort of next topic that we can talk about. When we're talking about the westward migrations in the 9th and 8th and the 7th centuries, they show up and there are other people living all over this region. And one of the first people that they run into is a country called Urartu, which is not a country that a lot of people have ever heard of before, or a kingdom that everybody has heard of before. So Urartu is a big kingdom that sat sort of right here in the what we would call Ciscaucasian region of geography, right around Lake Van, which is this guy right here. And they were the primary opponents of the Assyrians for quite some time. And as Assyria was expanding during the beginning of the Iron Age, we refer to this as the Neo-Assyrian period, coming back after the collapse of the Bronze Age. Urartu and Assyria had lots of wars. Well, when the Scythians first show up, the people that they run into first are Urartu, or the Urartians. Yeah, I know, it's a crazy name. And the way that the Urartians respond is by building giant fortresses. And we can see a few of these remains today. This particular one is one that I would love to go to, but it's hard to travel to Armenia. This is a place called Karmir Blur, and it is a big border fortress that was built when the Scythians showed up on the border with Urartu, and it was designed specifically to try to keep these people out. This is it's not too far from the modern capital of Armenia, which is a place called Yerevan. If we want to go back to the map and look at that, we're talking about like right about here. I wonder if we could see it from space. Karmir Blur. We'll see. Let's see what we've got. I don't know if we're going to be able to see too much from this. Yeah, there's some pretty decent ancient stuff here. Check it out. That's a pretty good ancient site. You can see the mound that it was built on, right? This is the big ancient tell. You can see some of the remains of walls and buildings and stuff. This is the fortress here, though. You can. Oh, that's a good picture of the wall. This is pretty neat. I guess I should have tried to zoom in on this earlier. But anyway, you can see we're building border fortresses. We're trying to keep those people out. And we're doing whatever we can to block them from getting down into our heartland. But it doesn't work. Those Scythians are clever and capable. And they end up moving way further south. So they just assumed that the Scythians were going to try to attack and conquer all their stuff first or what? No. Scythians are going to cause trouble. They show up, and one of their most common forms of trouble is raids. They will pack up a whole bunch of people on horseback. They'll push into your country. They'll shoot a whole bunch of people. They'll load up a bunch of your stuff, and then they'll just scarper off. Right? And the Scythians had been raiding Urartu for a while before they ever got close enough to establish cities that were going to directly threaten Urartu. So, I mean, this is a period that's happening not over 1 year. This is something that's happening over, decades, right? So it's not like they kind of showed up out of nowhere one day and was just like, ha, suddenly Scythians, right? So the Urartu country must have been pretty small. No, they were pretty big and powerful. It's just the Scythians are hard to destroy. They won't stay still. They don't like getting pinned down in one big fight. They'll hit you and then run away, and you've got to go chase them. And then when you chase them out, they surround you and shoot you all the way back home. And then after they've destroyed your army, then they show up and take all of your cities. As long as your cities are, without defenders. They don't have a good chance with walls most of the time, because Scythians don't have siege mechanics and stuff like that. All right, but they have some success, and they are able to take some Urartian locations. And I get to put on the adventure hat here. I get to wear the adventure hat when I show you pictures of places that I have been. And one of the places that I have been is this location, which is a place called Kavuştepe. And it's in modern-day Turkey, as you can tell by the giant Turkish flag. Kavuştepe is a Urartian hill fortress, and this place was destroyed probably by the Scythians, probably in the 700s. But you can see here the remains of the city itself, and it runs all the way along this ridge line. So the city starts like over here and runs pretty much all the way down as far as you can see down this ridge. And this is like the highest part of the ridge all the way down here, but there are remains all the way down all of this. And you can see here that the hill itself is pretty friggin' steep, and it's rather tall. This is not something up which you're going to ride a horse, right? Now, over here on these big plains, sure, ride your horses on that all day long. But if I've got a really big fortress up here on the top of this mountain that got big walls, and there were big walls. Like, here are some remains of the walls. And again, these are Iron Age walls, so these would be probably 2,700 years old. This is on the back side of the hill. But, these are big, scary fortresses. And these walls are obviously in bad repair. They would have been much taller at the time. But you can see the remains of the big sort of support pillars. And they go all the way down, and you can see that they're actually trying to rebuild some of the site here in modern day, and I don't really care for that very much. But anyway, this is in modern day Turkey. If we look at the map, it's right about here is where Kavuştepe is. Are you not entertained? What up, Aristotle? And crew. Hello, everybody. Welcome in. Dun dun dun. Dun 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 dun. Lucky. Thank you so much for that follow. And welcome to the adventure. Glad we can raid you for a change. Eris, you raid me like all the time. All the time you raid me. Bagman, thank you so much for that follow. Welcome to the adventure. Can't wait for the second Gladiator movie. I'll go watch it. Hey everybody, welcome in. My name is Shane. I teach history and sociology at college, and on my stream we talk history stuff, and we're doing a viewer request stream tonight. Our viewers have asked to talk about the Scythians, who are a group of Iron Age horseback archer semi-nomadic people that are kicking everybody's butt. And I'm wearing the adventure hat because I was just showing pictures of this location that I was at in modern-day Turkey. This is a place called Kavuştepe, which was a hilltop fortress of the Urartian people, built as a way to try to secure their land against Scythian invasion, and it did not work. The Scythians destroyed this city sometime in the middle 700s. But I get to wear my cool hats when we do stuff. This is the adventure hat. I get to wear it when I show pictures of stuff that I've been to. I was taking those pictures back in 2022. So, cool stuff. Eris, thank you so much for the raid, my friend. Good to see you. I hope everything yesterday went well. If you want to give like a 2-word summation, you are welcome to. like went great or was horrible. I hope it's not that one. But welcome in, everybody. Please feel free to ask as many questions as you want. It doesn't even necessarily have to be about the topic in particular. We're just having a good time and trying to learn history in a way that is approachable, accessible, understandable, and not boring as crap like most history is, right? Just put the hat back on. If I put the hat back on, I have to show you something else, right? That's the deal. You don't get to just summon the adventure hat and then go just wear the hat. But I can show you something that's really interesting. Well, I don't know. I found it interesting, mostly because when we were at Kavish Tepe, it was about hurricane force winds, and I'm not even joking. And I can show you how bad that was. Let me put this here where I think it can get captured by Twitch. Show us the history of the hat. Well, you're about to see me in the hat. All right. Yep. Okay, so this is a video. I didn't record this. The guy that was with me recorded this, but this was when we were... Oh, crap. No. This is when we were at Kavish Tepe, and I hope you can hear the audio on this. I don't know if you'll be able to pick up the audio on this or not. So, you'd raid that hill with ease. Kahini, I mean, go at it, but it's a pretty steep hill. It's a pretty rough one to go. And the point here is that we couldn't even hear each other. My friend Dan asked me, give us a little bit of an update on what's going on. And I said, well, it's a bit windy. And I only know that because I remember saying it. It's a rough spot at that point. They didn't ride up that hill on horses, I promise you. Just put the hat back on. You should show Eris that 2500 boot. So this is a shoe, or a boot, that was pulled out of a Scythian tomb a couple of years ago. That's like 2600 years old. But it's really well preserved because it was buried in a tomb that was covered in like basically Siberian permafrost. So, how does one go about submitting a viewer request? I'd like to put one in concerning Eris's hard drives. Not something that I have access to. So, not anything that I can necessarily do. But there are two ways to get a Cytharella. That's interesting. Or Syntharella. Okay, I get it. There are two ways to do viewer requests. The first is the way that we got this topic, and that is through the democratic process. So we try to alternate the processes, and if it's a democratic one, basically I say, hey, somebody put a topic in chat that you think would be cool, and then I take the first 4 ideas that I think I could manage in 2 hours or so, and we put them in a poll, and then everybody in chat gets to vote on what topic they want out of the poll. Now, there are other ways that you can obtain a viewer request, and one of those is through buying one with stream points, and it's called Choose Your Own Adventure, like the old Choose Your Own Adventure games, right? Or books, rather. And then you got to drop the points on them. So currently it's 10,000 for the first one, and then it increases 10,000 every time after that. And we're kind of on the honor system about where you are on that stuff. So, have I said hello to everybody? Nixolotl, hey, good to see you. Kahini, I saw you come in as a first-time chatter. Welcome in. Good to see you. Thanks for the follow. Well, not for the follow. Thanks for the chatting. I also saw Bagman chatting. Welcome in. History Buff, welcome back. Good to see you. Kahini, I wasn't trying to get you to do that, but thank you for the follow and welcome to the adventure. Where did they get the beads? They made them. They would make them out of bones or stone or something like that, and it was an incredibly painstaking process with like little stone needles and stuff like that. It's really hard to do. Really, really hard to do. Just pics of hot goths. Okay, interesting. Wicked Sith of the West. Okay, would have taken that one. Hey, Kyle, good to see you, man. Welcome in. Your internet history would be very different than your hard drives. There we go. What are we trying to talk about? Like, what's on Eris's hard drives? Kay, welcome in. Good to see you. Welcome back. You don't see that option. Yeah, because it's not on. I don't leave it on all the time. Shane, to answer your question, it went well. Yes, not top tier because the job has shifted specializations, but it was good nonetheless. We'll hope for the best then. Moose, what up? Welcome in. Doesn't mean they had access to advanced technology at the time. Yeah, I turn it off because I have a list of people that are waiting to buy one. So if you have the points and you want to buy one, I could put you on the list, but you have to wait your turn. Maybe you're because you were thinking maybe those boots were special. No. Those would have absolutely been signs of like really, really big levels of value. You're not going to just wear those around for fun or, to just goof off in. That's not your wearing around the house shoes. Those are the I'm super rich and nobody can touch me kind of shoes. Yeah, like or maybe wedding boots or something like that. Caldillo. All right, you are on the list. Oop. The list. These boots were not made for walking. I think maybe they got the boot from an ancient city. Where the heck are these Scythians and what's going on if I zoom out? So you mean zoom out like on the map? I can do that. We're talking mostly about this region right here, where they are currently located in our historical story. In the Caucasian region, around the Caucasus Mountains, between the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea. Today, this is modern-day Russia and Georgia and Armenia and Azerbaijan and Turkey and the northern part of Iran and Iraq. It's like right around in here. No one said aliens. Urartu barter trade. Urartu had currency, but the Scythians at that time didn't. But I'm sure they would have taken it. And most people would have been using gold. Scythians were really good at using gold. Those boots are strong proof of some advanced life at the time, or aliens. Or maybe they just had skilled craftsmen and we shouldn't underestimate the ingenuity and skill of ancient people. But, what do I know? I'm just a history guy. Who cares about that stuff? Anyway, so they're going to show up. They're going to beat up Urartu. But what's interesting here is the first time we actually have a written documentation of a specific name of a Kurgan. So we have a named king now. This is going to show up in 679 BC. And the guy's name is Ishpakaya. And we have his name from an Assyrian source. So the Assyrians would have been down here in what is modern-day Syria, Iraq, northern Mesopotamia. And we hear Ishbakaya's name recorded in history, the first named Scythian that we know, and again, that's 679 BC. Yeah. So no. They have Kurgans. They've had Kurgans before, and we know that they're organized this way. This is just the first guy we know the name of. It's not like he's the first one ever. It's just the first one that we have recorded. Were the Bussyrians a little later? Okay, I see what you're doing there. They're right before the Cussyrians and the Dussyrians. I appreciate the trolling. The Fussarians were the bad ones, though. Doing folk history linguistics, Kurgan sounds suspiciously close to King Koenig. So Kurgan turns into Kagan, which turns into Khan. So there's your connection to later linguistics. The king and Kuring and stuff like that is going to come from different linguistic groups that are going to show up at later times. But it's good that you see that sort of stuff happening. So I like that line of thought, and it's a good one to follow. And linguistics and stuff like that, right up my alley. Absolutely stuff that I dig. So they made themselves a kingdom, right? Or a Kurganate, if you want to call it that. I don't care. It's just a kingdom, though. They're going to establish themselves a capital. They're going to start moving up the Black Sea coastline, and they're going to take over the Crimean Peninsula. And on the Crimean Peninsula, they're going to establish themselves a capital at a place that's called Neapolis. And Neapolis is still around, and we can go look at it. If we zoom in a little bit, it is in the modern-day Crimean Peninsula, which is Ukrainian, despite the fact that Russia thinks that it's theirs. But we can see here the remains of the ancient city, Neapol. This is a very old satellite image. I don't know why it's so old. Perhaps it's hard to get satellite imagery of this place, or maybe Russia's limiting it. But there are a few remains here that we can see. There's one big structure that's supposedly like a burial structure, but you can see here that the ancient site was pretty big and would have had a lot of other structures that are out here. Of course, all this place has been excavated. Most of these excavations happened in the 60s through the 80s. But Neapolis is going to be their capital for a long time, and that's going to be kind of their raid enforced launching spot. So when you call all the guys together and you're going to go start a raid, you call them all to Neapolis, they get their orders, they get their assignments, their writing instructions, and then we all set out in a big old thing to go wreck somebody's world. And because this is sort of geographically isolated, that's also going to give them quite a bit of defense, because they're on horseback and they're moving more quickly. So they can kind of pop out of here and raid into the Greek world or over here into the Ciscaucasian world rather easily, and then pop back over to Crimea, and it's really hard to attack them down here because you're so surrounded, and it's hard to get at, right? So this is obviously a Greek name for the place, and they took it from other places or other people. They start taking Greek colonies around this time period. You're thinking that they might have been related to the Mongols, but it seemed a bit off. So, linguistic ties to later languages of the region, yes. Ethnic ties, no. They were way before the Mongols became the Mongols. These people would be separated from Mongols by probably 1,000 years or so. So, not ethnically or genetically related, but linguistics are fluid things that move and spread. So you can get linguistic ties that run into stuff, and horseback nomadic people of the steppe, you know, they're going to move around a lot. Yes, this is before the Sarmatians. Okay. Were they vulnerable by sea? Yeah, because they didn't have any navy. But the distance from where their capital is to the sea is substantial, so you had to come off land. Like, you had to land your ships and then attack. And you were going to have problems doing that, because as soon as you got on the land and you started marching inland, they're going to start harrying you with their archers, and they're going to be able to move faster than you. And if you're going to bring a navy big enough to launch a cavalry charge over here, man, that's tough. Putting horses on ships and sailing across the Black Sea is rough. Like, quite literally rough. The Black Sea has a lot of very bad storms and a lot of very bad currents. And at this time period, you're not going to see a whole bunch of people that are Greek or Lydian or Phrygian or Urartian that were super interested in loading up a big navy and loading that navy down with horses and then transferring all the way up to the Crimean Peninsula to attack the Scythians. Linguistics is some of the best examples to undermine biological constructs in human cultural populations. Absolutely, Maddie. Great point. And hey, Maddie, good to see you. I was actually reading about this the other day, about the linguistic explosion of the late 1800s and early 1900s, and how the study of philology ended up running into loggerheads against people that were doing stuff like anthropology and history, because linguistics were showing that there were cultural ties or connections between groups of people that history was saying had no connection. And so then history had to pause and reconsider what was going on, and anthropology had to stop and go, well, maybe because philologists were like, no, it's pretty obvious that these languages are related to one another, and despite the fact that they live disparate, distances away from each other, or maybe they're different through time, there is obviously some link between these groups, and you're going to have to figure out what it is. And then history sort of goes and sits in its corner and pouts because it doesn't like being told that it's wrong, right? What kind of navy existed at this time? They wouldn't have had huge ships that were going to be able to sail across open water. All of the naval stuff that's happening during this time period is sailing along the coastline. You would not get way out into super deep open water. You would follow the currents around the coast. They had mostly powered by oars, but some sails, but not like the big super triangular sail and square riggings that you would see on something like a ship from the 1400s or something of that nature. We would have probably had one mast with one big sail maybe, and that would have been used to augment the rowing power, but most of the ships are going to be rowed. But a fair question, Kahini. What up, hydrocannabinoid? Do horses get seasick? I don't know. That's a great question. That's a very good question. Could it have been a pigeon or cant versus a creole? Maybe, but I don't know. At this point, we're talking about... are you just saying interesting words because we're talking about philology, or are you asking a specific question about the language of the Scythians? You've dated pouty historians. Fair, right? We do get a little bit miffed sometimes when we have to accept new terminology and new ideology from non-historical settings. And I've actually tried really hard to break out of my my educational stance on that and tried to embrace information from wherever it came. And that makes me a giant weirdo among all of my other history friends. I'm in a messenger group with about 5 or 6 other history educators, and I'm very frequently referred to as the heretic, because they'll say something and I'll go, well, that doesn't line up with genetics, and they'll go, you're a heretic. Or they'll say something and I'll go, well, that doesn't really line up with sociology, and then they'll call me a heretic. Or I'll say something like, well, that doesn't really line up with anthropological experience, and they're like, well, you're a heretic. But I'm okay being a heretic, right? The language influence being nomadic, they would have had interaction without common language to join. Oh yeah, so we're mostly going to be doing loan words here, right? The nomadic peoples of the steppe are going to be in contact with each other, but not frequent contact and not extended contacts. A lot of the trade that goes on across the steppe is going to happen on sort of standardized times of migration patterns. So like, I know that I'm going to be at this place at this time, and you know that you're going to be at this place at this time, and while we're both there, we may as well trade with each other, right? So you're going to not have a lot of experience. You might have some intermarrying where people are going to bring linguistics back and forth, but this isn't really like a full linguistic merge that gets from Scythian all the way up to Mongols. It's not like the Mongol language preserves a significant portion of the Scythian language. It's more like Kurgan becomes a sort of I don't know, like a trope almost of big, powerful horse warlord that causes trouble from the steppe, and other people will transliterate that word through their language. So by the time you get to the Turkic languages, which are going to be the big group that sort of leads into the Mongol languages, they're not a direct descendant of the Turkic languages, but Turkic language has a lot of impact on Mongol language. The word Kurgan goes to Kagan. So you might hear people refer to as the Khaganates of the Turks, the Goturk Khaganate, or the, I don't know, there's like 6 or 7 of these big Khaganates, the Bulgarian Khaganate, right? But that word then ends up getting clipped, and you drop the G in the middle. G gets clipped a lot in language, so you get Kagan, and then you drop the G, and you just get Khan, and then that goes to Khan, right? Which is where you get it in the Mongolian. So it's like loan word stuff. It's not a full Creole or a full even Pidgin or even a full Cant. It's just loaning words. Are my friends wanting to fight you? Probably not. They're just stodgy and classically trained. One of my friends, got a degree in England, got his PhD in England. Everybody else is like stodgy old historian guy, and I'm the weirdo that's like, let's study everything, having to ruffle feathers pretty much. What's the time frame between real-time archaeological finds affecting my teachings and my beliefs? So like, how long is it between when we dig something up and when I change my mind? Publishing archaeology is actually really, really slow. So you see stuff like, hey, we've dug up this boot, but it might be 5 years before somebody publishes the site review of that location, because you have to go through every single piece that you found and then analyze it, and then you have to go through the peer review process. So just because we found something and it radiocarbon dates to this time period doesn't mean I immediately change my beliefs. There's a healthy level of skepticism there, and healthy levels of skepticism say, I want you to prove that what you're saying is true, but if you do prove it, I will change my mind, right? It's not, something new happened, I've got to switch my beliefs, and it's also not, I'm never changing my mind, period. Those are both unhealthy levels of skepticism. One being far too little skepticism and one being far too much skepticism. Thank you, Heretic, for questioning. Always. I'm happy to be a heretic. Hanging out in both historian groups and sociology groups lets you bring insight to each other. Absolutely. Absolutely. I read somewhere, maybe one of the writers of Indo-European stuff, of a general principle that the peoples of that area of the flatter lands were farmers and spoke Proto-Indo-European, and the mountain people spoke Proto-Uralic. I don't know if that's generally accepted, let alone says anything about the Scythians. So there are going to be overlaps between the original Proto-Indo-European language and the Scythian language, most notably because when we look geographically speaking at the Indo-European language origination region, we're talking about basically this area right here, right? Indo means from India, and European means they're going to go there, but Indo-European originates in this area right around in here, and those people are going to move down into India during a migration period, but they're actually going to leave India in multiple different locations, including the big one, which is what's going to end up populating most of Europe. That starts about 60,000 or so BC, that moves out of this region and populates all of this Central Asian region, and then comes across this way and into Europe through this way. So Indo-European language actually comes through the Iranian Plateau and Turkey and the Balkan Peninsula this way south and across the northern part through this region here to get over to Europe north. And that means that the Indo-European language group is going to be sitting right here waiting for the migration of Iranian people up to this region, which becomes the original Scythian group of people that then move over here. So there are going to be some words that are going to look very similar, and we know that their language, being the Scythians, was similar to the Sumerians, Cimmerians, not Sumerians, Cimmerians, and they had some similarities with the Median language, Media being basically this region right here, south coast of the Caspian Sea, and that they weren't completely alien to the Sarmatians who came behind them. So it's pretty obvious that they have linguistic ties to some of the other stuff. But I don't know specifically about a differentiation between plains and mountains. That sounds like it could be true, but I haven't read enough about that to actually know. Yes, Turkic language and Mongol languages are converging languages instead of diverging. Exactly. Thank you, Eva. Wouldn't fight Maddie. She's learned her fighting tactics from MacGyver. Archaeology master race. Oh yeah, I mean, I've done a lot of stuff in genetics. My wife has actually taught me a lot of genetics, and I've read extensively on genetics because this is something that directly involves a lot of historical stuff, and I really dig that. An anthropologist and an archaeologist walks into a bar, right? I will create an entire metaphysics to avoid positions I don't like. That's pretty much like what some of these people do, right? The trick is who will be drinking with the others. You can't just magic make believe your way out of... Yeah, exactly. Some people love doing that, but I don't really care for it very much. Okay, trying to get back on track here. If we look at this is a picture of the site of Neapolis. This is a drone shot of the location. You can see here part of this tower structure remains. Not a lot of stuff going on. I'd still love to go see it, but again, this is in Crimea. Today is not the safest place to be in Crimea. Thanks to very stupid and pointless Russian aggression. But the Scythians are going to make themselves a kingdom, and if we look at their territory, it's pretty big. They managed to take all of this chunk of territory, which is quite a bit. And here we see Urartu. Now, this, again, is a little bit later on. This is 241 BC. And I don't really actually like a way that a lot of this map is... Like, I don't really like a lot of this at all, but that's me being weirdo. This is obviously not 241 BC. This is obviously at about... So we have the Kingdom of Judah. So this is prior to 586 BC. Kingdom of Judah falls in 586 BC to the Babylonians. So despite the fact that this says that the peak of Scythia is in 241, this particular map has to be showing... and the Kushite Empire, so we're before the revival of the new... not the New Kingdom. We're before the Ptolemaics. So this would be probably... so Kushites, the 26th dynasty of Egypt. So this is third intermediate period. Yeah, we're like 500-ish, 600-ish. Sorry, no. When did that take? Well, it depends. All right, now I'm getting... Anyway, it's like 600 BC. This map is from about 600 BC. Because it's after the fall of the Northern Kingdom. And this is also... Anyway... Scythians, big old chunk of territory. I really should have looked at that map better. I don't like that map. Alas. They had MS Paint in 600 BC. Yeah, it's kind of crazy. So the Scythians have a big empire, and we're not going to spend a whole time going through every single leader and every single war because there's just too much to talk about. We could do probably 3 or 4 streams on the Scythians just talking about the historical records that we have of them. They're going to cause a lot of trouble. They raid Greece. They're going to raid the Macedonians. They raid over as far as Central Europe. They're going to show up in art in places like Italy. There's a potential that they even showed up all the way over in the Iberian Peninsula, which is, say Spain and Portugal. That one is a little bit speculative. I don't know if I'm sold on that. There's also one sort of weird reference where they fought the Egyptians, which is something that I've also kind of felt a little bit skeptical about in the past. But anyway, the point here is that they are a big empire. They have a lot of soldiers. They're very powerful. And they weren't what the Greeks referred to as barbarians, right? They had an organized culture, organized religion. They were very powerful. They had beautiful works of art. We're about to start talking about culture and stuff like that. They held on for quite some time, had a really big power, but they're going to start declining by the time we get to the 400s, and by the time we get to the 200s, they're going to really be in a steep decline. And by the time a group called the Sarmatians show up in the mid to late 200s BC, they're going to end up pretty much dying out as a centralized culture. Now, this doesn't mean that all the Scythian people dry up and blow away into the wind, but their central authority is destroyed, and their culture starts turning into other things, or it gets subsumed by other things. Linguistically, again, we have the Ossetians who speak that language today, which might be the closest thing we can get to ancient Scythian. But culturally speaking, most of their individualized stuff is going to get picked up by other people or is going to just die out. And again, they don't have written language, so we don't have internal discussions about what's going on culturally. Everything that we have written is from outside sources. RM 2069 representing your RC lineage. Oh, so you know your haplogroups. That's really cool. Yeah. We talked about genetics right at the beginning of the stream, Kay. I don't know if you were here at that point. You're confused by the BC and the AD timelines. What is that outside the religion book? So that... I mean, that was obviously made by religious people. The division of years between BC and AD is obviously built around Christ's birth. But that's the nomenclature that we have now. And you can say CE and BCE if you want to, but it doesn't really mean anything different. BCE and CE is an attempt at not saying BC and AD, but I think it's kind of lame because it's still the same year number, and we know around what we're talking. I'm wearing Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle shirt. I love the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I actually have on the wall over here, a print that's signed by Kevin Eastman, one of the creators of the Ninja Turtles. I'm a big Ninja Turtles fan. Huge Ninja Turtles fan. It's a Band-Aid over the original religious dating. Yeah, sure. But before that, you didn't have one unbroken string of years. There were 14 dozen different ways to keep up with the years. We have to, if you read ancient Assyrian stuff, everything is yearly recorded in a chronicle, but it's recorded by the year of the king so-and-so. So, the 4th year of king so-and-so, the 5th year of king so-and-so, the 6th year of king so-and-so. In Egypt, you have several different dating nomenclatures. You have in the year of the reign of so-and-so, or you have the year of when the Apis bull died. These are important year markers because we know that they keep a bull that's dedicated to the god Apis in one of the big temples, and we know how long it lived, and every year it lived, and every year it died. So we can use that to figure out what year it is. And we have, obviously, records of stuff like, I'm so-and-so, and I reigned 50 years, check out my cool statue, right? But, like, we say that it's 2024. That's still 2024 years since that guy in the 1500s said that Jesus was born in the year 0. He wasn't. Jesus was almost certainly born. Well, I guess we could get into the debate of when Jesus was born. Sometime between 4 and 7 BC. The guy was off a little bit, right? Pretending BCE and CE isn't somehow better or fixing the issue, it doesn't even scratch that stuff. Right. We should refine the years B2K, A2K. Before the year 2000 and after the year 2000. But at that point, like, isn't 2000 still 2000 years since Christ, right? I joked that everything should be dated before COVID and after COVID, because COVID really screwed up my sense of time. Oh, that's the joke. I gotcha. So they don't have, there is no year 0. There is 1 BC and the next year is 1 AD. But it's generally accepted as a date regarded of religiousness. Yeah, like if I asked you what day is today, you're going to say that it's 2024, right? You're going to say that it's, I don't know, I guess it could be June the 5th, depending on where you are timeline-wise. But 5th of June, 2024. Everybody is going to accept that it's the 5th of June, 2024. If you go back in time and you say, what day is it? They're not going to tell you the 5th of June, 2024, the 4th of June, 2024. They're going to tell you that it's a month and a day, and they're going to tell you maybe something like, if we went back and found the Scythians, right, and said, what is today? They're going to be able to tell you the day of the week and the month of the year, but they're not going to tell you that it's 679 BC if we go back and find Ishpakiah. He's going to say that it's year 1 of the reign of Ishpakiah, and it's the 6th month and the 4th day of the 6th month, right? But days of the year start at different times. Like, you know, our New Year Day in the United States is January the 1st, but New Year's Day has been all over the place in a lot of different places, right? March used to be the New Year's Day in Rome because you'd go fight, and that would be the beginning of the year. You'd have your ceremony to Ares. You'd throw your big spear out in the not Ares, Mars. You'd throw your big spear out into the field of Mars, and you would say, "Look, it's time to go fight," and that would be the beginning of their year. Also, that's why it's called March. But whatever. Origin of the Species was published in 1859. We could take that as a 0 point. Before Darwin, after Darwin. That's an interesting one, Brian. Before coffee and after coffee. Yeah, that's sort of like my morning, right, Kay? Like, before coffee, you don't speak to me. After coffee, I'm okay. Before singularity and after singularity, but it's always 20 BC because we think it's just 20 years away. Yeah, Frank, that's true. My year starts with March, but you're silly that way. Okay, are you still practicing the Roman stuff? Also, do we know that the 2024 exactly... no, we don't, Evo. Because we rearranged the calendar several times since then. Most notably with the shift from the Julian to the Gregorian calendar. I did a history of calendars as a viewer request stream, Kahini. If you want to go back and watch the VOD on it, it will probably answer a lot of your questions. I forget what it was or who it was, but you read once that there was a tribe in South America that had one word for day, and they would point forward while saying it to indicate yesterday. Yeah, Claudio, that's... I don't know if that's in a particular location, but I've heard that similar thing. The idea was they could see yesterday, but not tomorrow. Interesting. You can start your year with Easter if you wanted to, yeah. The whole French Revolution calendar thing. Oh, yeah. When we got rid of all of the months of the year and renamed all of them. So we would be in Thermidor right now, right? I think starting with January is arbitrary. Everything is arbitrary. Starting a new year is arbitrary because at any given point, it's a new year, right? It doesn't really matter. Years exist, but years mark a return from one spot to that same spot again in the revolution around the sun. But when you decide to start designating the beginning point is completely arbitrary, right? We know that it's 364.74 days or something like that, or 76 days, right? But anyway. The only year that matters is the fiscal year. Well, you know, that's a whole other thing that's based around crop rotation and things like that. All right, so Scythian culture, quickly because we're running out of time. Scythian culture is all about some horses, and I can show you their depiction of horses. Boom, here's a Scythian horse. Now, I also chose this picture because it shows you that they're really good at bronze and iron and gold work, and this is obviously made out of gold. This would have been pretty clearly cast. This is a... What is my mouse doing? Lots of cool details here. My mouse is going bonkers kabonkers. But here we have some good examples of Scythian horseback with armor, fighting a guy over here. Got some shields and stuff like that. They did build some stuff, but they're not necessarily super big on establishing gigantic fortresses. They're going to have walls around their cities, but we're not talking about stuff that's like enormous fortress that's impenetrable kind of stuff. It's a little bit more like we've got some walls because we just want to make sure that nobody walks in. Did they get raided back? They did, and they're going to end up falling to the Sarmatians, who are other people that are horseback archer stuff, right? So they can give chase. They believed in the best defense being a good offense. Yeah. It is crazy stuff. But we do know that the Scythians came into contact with other people because we have stuff like this. This is a Scythian archer on a Greek vase. So you have depictions of these people in other cultures, and you can find Scythians showing up in all kinds of different cultures' art. You can find Etruscan stuff and Persian stuff and Assyrian stuff showing showing Scythians. But that's pretty cool. Is it like there's a single German word for morning and tomorrow? I don't know, maybe. Así es en español, tú sabes. I don't know. Yo no sé. Cool hat, So these people have cool stuff. Here's another piece that is just really, really freaking cool. And I wanted to show this one specifically because, again, if you read some of the sources from the Greeks, you're going to hear the Scythians referred to as barbarians. And that these people are just horrible, uncultured. But I don't know how you can look at this piece. And this, by the way, is just a decoration that would have gone either around your neck or over your shoulder. But I don't know how you can look at this piece and go, oh yeah, those people are totally uncultured barbarians, right? Just absolute, utterly uncultured barbarians. This is spectacular. It's absolutely crazy levels of gold work and skill here. The fine level of detail is amazing. It's just crazy stuff, right? I roll your eyes at what the Greeks and the Romans call people barbarians. History buff, that's a good thing, right? That's fair. Anytime they go, those people are barbarians, you're like, show me their art and their artistry. So here's another piece. This is a belt buckle, and I wanted to show you this one in particular because this shows off their skill at doing stone inlay. So you see like the eyes here, these are stones that have been like inlaid into the gold. You can tell that some of them have fallen off, obviously, but this is pretty cool stuff. And it takes a lot of skill to make this level of detail in art and also get the stones to sit in place and stuff like that. You know, interesting and pretty cool stuff. Barbarians wear pants. You can spot them coming from a long way off, right? The animal anatomy is point on too, right? And that's a good thing to point out, Nixlotl, because if you see stuff like that, you understand that they have a level of skill that gets things like proportion. They understand things like light and shadow, and they understand things like what's the I've completely lost my artistic term. Orientation, but that's not the right word. When things are like quartered away from you, you say that you're perspective. I got there eventually. I'm not a complete moron. From the English language, I'd argue barbaric could also mean savage in an attitude towards others. Fair. You see the medieval Europeans painting cats and horses compared to that? Yeah. Medieval Europe art is obviously not as good as some of this older stuff. America got nothing on that belt buckle? Maybe. Great proportion, except their horses are slim. Yeah, we do like our horses a bit more chunky, don't we? So they've got really cool culture. Horses are obviously very important. Horses are symbols of status, and this is actually going to get into a discussion about class kind of briefly. They had a multi-tiered class structure, and there were sort of 3 levels, if you would. There's the nobility at the top, and this includes the royal tribe, where the Kurgan would have come from. But it also includes all the other nobility and the priests. So priests were considered upper class regardless of their level of income. The middle class is not really a middle class. It's only middle because it's in the middle, but it's more like lower class, but not as low. So it's like upper lower class, if that makes any sense. These were people that were going to be able to own some property. The Greeks called them 8-leggers. And they got called 8-leggers because they could own 2 oxen, which is a fairly sizable amount of property compared to everybody else who were serfs that basically didn't own anything. But these are people that have some level of economic power, and they're actually going to be the backbone of the Scythian economy, because they're going to be the ones that are producing stuff. They're going to be the ones that own the land and farm, and they're going to be the merchants and things like that. They're the sort of property owners, but like they're not rich. If you took the average noble and compared it to one of their middle class, the wealth gap here is exponentially different. And then at the bottom, you just have the serfs and the people that were in slavery. And again, their slavery is kind of like finger quote slavery. It's not like chattel slavery that we would see in something like the American South during the pre-Civil War era. It's a lot more close to like Greek slavery or Roman slavery, where you were obviously a slave and you didn't have a lot of rights, and you were indentured to a particular person, but there were ways out of it, and it wasn't necessarily permanent. And you were not considered like not a person. They're mostly going to be using bronze and wood. I've got some pictures of that if you want to talk about it. This one. So one of the cool things about the Scythians is their arrowheads. And you go, who cares about arrowheads? I do. These are fascinating. They made them in a particular way on purpose. So they have multiple cutting sides, and they're not just flat. So a lot of arrowheads that you see might be flat and have 2 cutting surfaces. Theirs had usually at least 3 and sometimes 4 cutting surfaces. And they did that on purpose, because if you get cut and the cut has 3 or 4 different sides, it is way harder to stitch those back together. These are also cast out of bronze, and they have these great little notches. So you would actually cut the shaft of the arrow to fit up into here, and then you could sort of crimp this metal part down on the shaft in order to ensure that your arrow fit into the arrowhead, which is sort of ingenious, right? One of the big things that happens is your arrowhead gets lost in the target if the the wrappings or the sinew or whatever's holding it together falls off. But if you've got like a crimp on a metal piece, you're going to be able to retrieve that much easier. I would think of each ox as a tractor. Maybe yoked together they are a tractor. They're sort of like being able to own a tractor, Frank. That's a fairly equitable situation here, right? Did you know that there were lions in Europe? Absolutely. Lions didn't die out in Europe until the late medieval period. Did they dip them in horse manure? Not that I know of. But that's really horrible chemical warfare kind of thing, right? That's a great way to get your baddies jacked up pretty bad. Snake venom. They did actually use snake venom, Kay. This is kind of fascinating. They are recorded in Greek sources for using snake venom to act as medicine, but also to act as poison. They had figured out the medicinal properties of snake venom and could actually use it as stuff like a clotting agent. So if you got a certain kind of wound that was bleeding, they could actually apply a certain amount of snake venom to that would clot your blood up and keep you from dying. But they could also use it to kill you, right? So you don't drink stuff offered to you by a Scythian if they're mad at you. Here's a pretty cool example of a Scythian sword. Again, we have this really freaking cool lion head gold handle with all this really great metal work here. We have an iron blade. These swords are pretty ubiquitous in the Scythian world. Even though they were primarily archers by battle style, they still used swords quite a bit. And swords are actually part of some of their religious ceremony. Because one of the things that they did to their war god was they would build these sort of shrines to their war god, and they would put a sword in the dirt at the top of this little hill. So they'd build this like mound, and then they would usually line it with like sticks or something, and there would be a ramp up to the top, and they'd stick a sword in the ground. And when you got done with the battle, if you had captives, you would sacrifice some of the captives to the war god, and you would basically pull them up the hill and cut their throat, and their blood would get poured onto the sword. And then there's this really weird thing that they would do. The priest would chop off the right arm of the captives, and they would throw the right arms of the captives up into the air, and they were supposed to be able to, by this, be sacrificing the war ability, because your right arm is, what you're swinging your sword with or pulling your bow with. You're sacrificing the ability of these soldiers to your god, and so you'd see like severed arms all around these little mounds that they would make. Left-handed people in the ancient world usually didn't get to be left-handed. They usually got forced into being right-handed, especially if they're a guy. Are we going to talk about the human sacrificing? We just did. Such forgery requires stability and time of... Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. What up, Lopta? Good to see you. Could you replace the blades to the swords? I'm sure that you could, because gold is rather malleable, and you would have had the iron fitted down into the gold. So if we go back to the picture of the sword here, this iron would have had something called a tang, and it's a filed portion that gets narrower that fits down into the handle of the sword. So the iron doesn't end just right here. The iron would have continued down into the handle to make sure that it was stable, and you could have probably moved this gold back out and replaced the iron blade if you wanted to. That would have been a very delicate process. And this is probably going to not be solid gold all the way through. It probably has some sort of internal wooden structure, or perhaps an internal metal structure that the gold is overlaid. Solid gold is not necessarily good for armor. It's very malleable and very ductile, and it's not good for taking a lot of violence. But this sword itself probably wasn't necessarily going to be used very much in battle because of the value that it had, because it was gold. This is probably ceremonial or status symbol kind of sword, right? Something that a noble would have worn around to show off. Whoever catches the arm is next to get married. No, actually, this is in the sources. When they threw the arms up in the air, they were signifying that they were the gods. So I am giving you this arm, and wherever it fell, you weren't supposed to touch it. You weren't supposed to move it, because that had become the property of their god of war. You weren't supposed to mess with it. Yeah, nice that they have a tay. Full tang is best tang. There we go. Does it cut? Does it keel? Perhaps. Potential new modern idiom. It's a sword tang. I like it. I mean, don't we all have gold ceremonial swords? Don't we all wish we had gold ceremonial swords? I'm guessing it was gold or was cast around the iron. It could have been the iron could have been cast that way, and then the gold overlaid on top of it. But it could also be gold casting as well. There's no alm in it. No wonder the priests were the upper class. Their god of war was obviously very important. Oh yeah, the god of war is one of the only ones that gets any sort of building. They don't. Scythians in general don't build temples. You don't go to the cities where they lived and find big temples dedicated to their gods. They didn't really get down very much with big religious structures. The war temple thing, which isn't even a temple, it's just sort of a mound with a ramp and a sword at the top of it. That's about all that you get. Empires are temporary. Sword tang is forever. Yeah, I get that Wu-Tang reference. Anyway, we all bought ours from the mall sword store. Yeah, there we go. Oh yeah, they have a whole pantheon of gods. So they just left the arms sitting there on the ground. Yes, just on the ground. You weren't supposed to touch them, bury them, or anything. A historian from 2000. Look at the craftsmanship in this Gundam figurine. Level detail. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they had like an earth god and a sky god and all kinds of gods. So they were pretty cool people. I like the Scythians a lot. Let me just make sure that I've said everything that I need to say. I'm pretty sure I've got everything covered. I mean, if anybody has any other questions about this, I'm sure that I could at least give a shot at answering it. I like the Scythians a lot. We could have very easily done 2 or 3 different streams as a small little Scythian series, but, you know, Wu-Tang is for the children. Uncle ODB is there for you, right? Actually, he isn't, because he's passed away, but, you know, R.I.P. ODB, right? They kind of sound like buttholes killing everybody and taking their stuff. Pretty much. You sound the yes, Sarmatians were the ones that came in the 200s, 300s and the 200s, and ended up wiping out the last of the Scythians. Choose the sword, right? You mentioned language, Ossetian, but other contemporary reflexes that there aren't really that we know of. Unreal Brian. You see occasional loan words, like we talked about how Kurgan goes into Khan, but most of the rest of their language seems to have kind of faded out with them, or the roots of their language hasn't been explored far enough through philology to know other words that maybe came from them. But again, without a written language, we are beholden to external sources to try to piece together what we can of the Scythian language, and that's very, very, very difficult to do. It's like working with... it's like trying to work backwards from a big pile of Legos without knowing what it looks like to begin with, right? So if I just gave you a giant pile of Legos, and told you to build the thing that it was originally, and you don't get to know what it was, and you don't have anything else to look at, it's tough to do. Should do a stream on Kumis and why it should be avoided, perhaps. I don't know, Caldia. You can say whatever you want to. I just don't say it on stream myself. We have some viewers that have kids that watch the stream, so I don't curse on stream. You're wondering about the horses, though. Were they smaller? It depends on what you mean, war horses. Like if we're talking about horses that were bred for cavalry charges in the 17 and 1800s, yeah, they're smaller than that. They're also not like the big Budweiser horses or anything of that nature. But, I mean, they're not like the little ponies that would have been hill ponies in the Tibetan plateau kind of stuff. I mean, their bows had recurves in the later periods, so that's part of it. I could show you again if I find that photo. So if we go back to this, you can see here that we've got a bow that's a recurve bow. Not just a line that goes straight down like this, but it comes out and then curves back. And what that does is increases the strength required to draw the bow, but that also means that the arrow is going to come off of the string a lot faster because of the stored potential energy in bending the arms of the bow back further, because the natural shape of the bow wants to pull it forward. So you're developing a much more powerful arrow shot coming off of one of these recurve bows as opposed to a sort of straight bow that you might see in other cultures. Are there people who are their descendants today? You see genetic markers that show up, but there's not a contiguous people group that has an unbroken lineage that goes straight back to the Scythians. There are people today that show genetic markers that arose from Scythian people from either the steppe period or the sedentary period, but you don't see like this chunk of people living in Crimea today that is still the original Scythian people. They were all intermarried and sort of erased as an ethnic identity. Yeah, and this is the next question. They were defeated and then sort of got swallowed up. Should do a thing on Rawlinson? Maybe. That'd be interesting, actually. Yeah, they're not Shetland ponies. Your schedule says Thursdays at 7, but it's Tuesday. I do viewer requests every other Tuesday. And I'm probably off the schedule. But that schedule on Twitch is just kind of junk. We talked about their downfall. The Sarmatians showed up and killed them all. And then they evaporated. Yeah. I mean, we're not going to go through the entire history of these people, like, year by year by year. That would take 16 years to get, not 16, it would take a lot of time. When I'm trying to cover an entire cultural group, you got to hit the highlights. We can't go through the entire step-by-step level of history. Did they throw their arms up into the air? The Sarmatians have similar culture, so it's possible that they did some human sacrificing of Scythians, but I don't know. I mean, it was a period of time that I said this earlier. The Sarmatians start being a problem for them in the 400s and late 400s, early 300s, and over the next 150 years or so, the Sarmatians pretty much wiped them out. And by the time you get to the middle and late 200s BC, there aren't Scythians left. Their god of war turned on them. Maybe. I mean, you got to keep the god of war happy, right? But it could also have been a lot of other things. There were a lot of things going on in the 300s and 200s that caused a lot of really dramatic shifts in cultural identities. Because, we're talking like, by the time we get to the 300s BC, we're talking about Alexander the Great. And by the time we're in the middle 200s, we're talking about the height of the Seleucids, the height of the Ptolemies. You've got Rome expanding and kicking everybody's butt. You've got a whole bunch of chaos in places like Asia Minor, as a whole bunch of small kingdoms end up fighting for each other. You have these people that are the Pontic kingdoms that are going to cause a lot of trouble for the Scythians, because the Pontic kingdoms were very well organized and had really, really good military, and were going to end up beating up them a lot and taking a lot of their territory and cutting off a lot of their trade. Did they have a significant victories over the Romans? No. By the time that the Romans start moving into this area, the Scythians had pretty much been eliminated as a serious threat to anybody that wasn't like basically right next to them. Tamiris and Cyrus walk into a bar. Yeah, so they were a big problem for the Persians. If we roll back to the 600s and the 500s, and we're talking about Persia, they were a big problem for the Persians. The Persian Emperor Darius actually takes an entire... this is hilarious. Darius got really, really mad at the Scythians and decided he was going to just chase them. And Darius was trying to campaign over here in the Balkans, and the Scythians were coming around the northern coast of the Black Sea, causing trouble up here and being butts. So Darius is just like, I'm going to chase you home. So Darius literally follows them like all the way around the Black Sea, and they just keep running away from him. And his army is marching, and they're just like riding into bow range and shooting them, and then riding away. And Darius is like, I'm gonna get you. So Darius literally goes all the way around the Black Sea chasing the Scythians, and doesn't end up doing very much at all, except for wasting his time and a whole bunch of his people's lives. But not every emperor is going to make wise decisions like that. So all right. So if anybody has any other questions, or don't Persians learn to use horse archers from that? I mean, Persia had horseback archers prior, but the Persians preferred heavy cavalry. It was kind of more their thing to have really heavy troops and really heavy cavalry. They liked the idea of just being scary. Yeah, it looked like Scooby-Doo. I frequently think of Darius chasing the Scythians around, playing the oh crap, now I can't say it. The British comedian, and it goes and like everybody's running in and out of doors and stuff like that. Benny Hill, yeah, Benny Hill, yeah. Now you want to go play Civilization, right? It's good times. If anybody has any questions, or if anybody wants to redeem any channel points, now is the time to do so. And we do need to pick our Kahini. Thank you so much for the donation. Let me remind you that there are literally hundreds of VODs. I don't do this for the money. I do this because I love doing it. I do appreciate the money, and I'm not trying to say like, no, don't do that. But it's never required or expected. I really appreciate the support, though. Do go check out the VODs, and if you want to, we've got a Discord that you can come hang out on as well. And I think everybody that streams has a Discord. I think it's sort of a pre-requirement. Like, do you have a Discord? But we talk history, and it's mostly me grousing about how I don't like certain research, or people sharing memes, or talking about what's in the news. I'm glad you got the "Do you have a flag" reference, Lopta. That's exactly what I was referring to. Eddie Izzard, do you have a flag? Scythians had allies. Yeah, they allied with a lot of different people a lot of different times. When they first showed up over in the Pontic steppe, they allied with the Cimmerians. They end up allying with the Urartians against the Assyrians. This is how we get Ishbakaya's name. It's in an Assyrian chronicle where the Scythians teamed up with the Urartians to attack Assyria. They worked with the Medes a little bit. For a little while prior to the Sarmatians becoming a threat, they did stuff with them. They sometimes worked against Thracian people, sometimes with Thracian people. They had occasional periods of time where some of the tribes might be kind of bought out as mercenary groups, but I mean they weren't completely isolated in their world, and they had friends and made friends and lost friends and stuff like that. Cake or death? Cake is good. I haven't had cake in a while. I'd actually quite like some cake. Okay, so let us pick our next topic, and to do that, you're out of cake, alas. To do that, we need to see if anybody on the list is in the room. Haven't had death in a while. I don't know what that means. Okay, so this is the list, and we're going to go down the list to see if anybody is in here. So JMR Killer, are you in the chat? If so, make yourself known. Retheus, are you in the chat? If so, make yourself known. Allie Briggs, I know you were here earlier. I don't know if you're still here. You might be work lurking. Allie, if you are in the chat, make yourself known. And I know that Caldillo is here. So if nobody else is here, Caldillo might get on the list and get his request in the first time. Katie, thank you so much for the gifted sub. And my sub alert isn't going off. This is really frustrating me. I have a sub alert. It's supposed to go off. The raid thing went off. The donation thing went off. But none of my subscription things are going off. All right. Last call for JMR, Retheus, or Ali. Is there a time period that I won't discuss? No. I'll talk about... I'm not going to say I'll talk about literally whatever. Henny, thank you again. The future. Can the request be history of anything? Not history of anything, but history of most things. Thank you so much for the subscription. And I'm really sorry that the stupid alerts aren't going off. I guess I'm going to have to go build alerts for every single thing. History of jam. See, there's the thing. I don't do individual food items anymore. I've been suckered into that before. I will not do history of a single food item. After the history of cheese took me 3.5 to 4 hours of prep time, we're not doing history of single food item. Yeah, anymore. I got burned on those. I also don't want to do history of a very, very specific niche thing. I mean, history of coffee would be cool, but I'm not going to do it. I've got to stick to the guns there. Siege weapons are one of those things that's tough too, because like I could probably do that, but how far back are we? I could probably do siege weapons. I could probably do... We're not going to do history of brie. No. We've already done history of cheese. History of Spanish influence in the Caribbean. Well, we could do like history of the Spanish Caribbean. We could do that. Yeah, like Spanish colonization of the Caribbean. Easy topic. Lots of material. Stuff that I already know. That'd be fine. Is there Latino futurism? I don't know. Like, I mean, are you asking if the concept of Latino futurism exists? Sure, but I have not done a stream on Latino futurism. What I think might be fun is a comparison, Spanish versus French colonialism in the Caribbean. That'd be an interesting one to do. I don't know how I would set that one up. I'd have to ponder that one a little bit. You're Dutch, so you look forward to Dutch history. We've done some history that's involved Dutch stuff before. We're getting to a point where we're about to get into... So on Tuesday nights, every other Tuesday night, we do viewer requests. But on Thursday nights, we do the history of history in order. We've started at the beginning and we're going through. We're about to get to the medieval period... Not the medieval, the Renaissance. And when we get to the Renaissance... the region of the Netherlands and the region of Belgium are going to come a lot more frequently into play. Literally any history is fascinating as long as I don't have to do the research. That's me, though. That's my thing, right? Most of the research that I do doesn't take me very long because I know a lot of it already, and I just make sure that my dates are correct in a lot of the cases. Sometimes I have to do research. Like, sometimes people ask for stuff that I don't know about, and I have to go do some digging, but that's fine. I've got plenty of books. So, Caldeo, do you have a specific idea of what you'd want to do? History of just the color indigo. Are you talking about the plant indigo or stuff that makes purple dye? Are you going to throw murex shells in there? You don't. Not at this moment. Okay, so you're still on the list. So you're still, you still have a place in line. Monsoon trade we could do. So here's the question. Does anybody at this point have both at least 10,000 channel points and an idea of a stream that you'd want to do? And if you've got both of those, say so in chat. So you have to have both of the things. Matt, you got something? What you got, Matt? I can see what up. History of oblique historical reference that Chain has never heard of. Just the Light Brigade. How about the Crimean War? Would that work for you? Because we could totally do history of the Crimean War. I would have no problem with that. But, like, just the Charge of the Light Brigade, I could read the poem, and it would take about 35 seconds to read the poem, and then we'd be done. But the Crimean War in general, that's interesting. We could totally do that. Okay, so here we go. Matt, you are about to see Choose Your Own Adventure pop up in the point redemption options. So everybody please be nice and respect the fact that this is for Matt. So Matt can redeem Choose Your Own Adventure. I've got a really bad ant bite from trying to do yard work yesterday. History of left-handed ducks. Interesting. I don't know how we would determine how a duck is handed, given the fact that they don't have hands. Would it be left-winged duck? Left-winged duck sounds like a really bad bluegrass cover of One-Winged Angel from Final Fantasy VII. And instead of chanting in Latin in the background, it's chanting in hillbilly. Quacking in Latin. Interesting times. All right. So we'll do Crimean War. I think I might make the stream title Crimean River. Crimean River. That just came to me. Anyway, Fleetwood Quack. Fleetwood Quack, right? If we're going to talk about just like a left-wing duck, right? Crimean War sounds like a great time for a picnic. I know what you mean. I know what you mean. It wasn't a great time for a picnic. I'm really bad at puns, and I'm bad at puns because I'm good at puns, by the way. Like, my puns are horrible, but that's why they're good. All right. So if nobody else has any questions or point redemptions or anything like that, I think we can go ahead and look for somebody. Unfollow. Oh, no. You need to request history of 90s cartoons. I don't even know what I would do with that, Nogre, right? I would just sing, like, Happy Happy Joy Joy from Ren and Stimpy or something. Or just sing the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles theme song for 2 hours until everybody unfollowed me. I don't know what I would... I really don't even know what I would do with that. So... All right, let's see who's on and doing a thing. Do 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 do. Who be streaming? I don't know where to go. Ooh, stop. Hush. I don't want to watch some dumb Venom thing. I so rarely use your Flux. Oh, dude, Eon Flux is great. I have the DVD box set of Eon Flux. I freaking love that show. The movie was atrocious. Atrocious. I don't even know why they made that movie the way that they did. It was just so bad. Let's go raid Cave Geek. We haven't raided Cave Geek in a while, and he kind of hates it when I raid him because he'll hang around until I'm done, and then he'll go start streaming, and then he's like, "Dang it, Shane, I didn't know you were still going to be streaming." Anyway, so this is sort of like kind of funny. Kahini, thank you again, man, for the gift subs. You like the movie, but it shouldn't have been called Eon Flux. If it hadn't been called Eon Flux, I might have liked it more. I'll be honest with you. I was going into that expecting more Eon Flux, and I got not Eon Flux. So that was very, very frustrating. All right, so let me say thanks. First off, thanks to all of our new follows. Thanks for the donations and the subscriptions tonight. Thanks to everybody that is subscribing. You can see their really cool designation out beside their names in chat. But we do have people that are supporting me off stream in ways that are not identifiable by Twitch. So I want to make sure that I say thanks to my patrons on Patreon. And I also want to say thanks to everybody that has sent me a book. If you are interested in supporting me on Patreon, there's the link. If you're interested in sending me a book, there are some suggestions. But until next time, everybody, I'll see you, and we'll be back on Thursday talking about the Renaissance. So take it easy, and see you next time.